Welcome to another day of CISO Forum Intercontinental. We are day 9. We started off this month with our Career Expo, where we had organizations from across Canada talk about their culture, their cybersecurity positions that are available right away or down the pipeline. We then had what's called the CPTC, Collegiate Penetration Testing Competition, with the Rochester Institute of Technology. CyberX, along with IBM, was able to host colleges and universities across Canada. The following week after that, which was last week, was CISO Forum Canada, where we had organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit, the public sector and the private sector, come together with speakers from all over Canada talking cyber. This week, we've had our Intercontinental CISO Forum. We started off with Africa. We then moved into the Middle East and then into Asia. Today, we are taking a really cool view into Latin America and the Caribbean. We are joined today by Patricia, Stuart, and Jake from the Caribbean. So jump right into this. I'm going to do a quick round table here and just an introduction. We'll start off with Stuart. If you could just introduce yourself and what is it that you do in the beautiful Caribbean?
Pleasure being here. My name is Stuart Franco. I'm the CEO of Trinidad Systems Ltd. We're an IT company here in Trinidad, existing for about 40 years.
Awesome. Jake?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Jake Corbin. I'm from the rainy island today of Barbados. I've been with TSL for about 16 years now. I'm Director of Sales and Marketing, Barbados.
Okay, and Patricia.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me here. I am Patricia Ghany, President of the American Chamber of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago, and my day job means that I am the CF of
So we're going to start off right off the bat. The topic is cybersecurity high on the list for Caribbean Board of Directors? I'm going to ask this question right off the bat to you, Patricia. Is it?
I think a lot of companies don't understand the seriousness of cyber attacks, and in many cases quite often believe that cybercrime is something that would not affect them. So as the Chamber of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago, in 2017 we decided to focus on this. We recognize that not only did our members lack that knowledge, but if we were to
Sorry about that. We've over the last couple of days, we have taken a journey across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, discussing cybersecurity, and a lot of conversations have come up. Since COVID, Patricia, do you think there's been a change in the mindset when it comes to cybersecurity at the board level?
Oh, yes, definitely. At our board level, it was something we decided to pivot quickly on. We decided to offer quite a few webinars to get our members up to scratch, because suddenly we had to pivot our organizations, have our employees work from home, but we also recognized that our members were also trying to engage in this new uncertain environment. So we ran a lot of programs dealing with cyber work from home policies. So it was something our board took to heart.
Very, very interesting. Stuart, I'm gonna take this to you. The same sort of question. I know TSL has been in the ICT space for quite some time, and you've seen the evolving environment in the cybersecurity ecosystem within Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean islands. With respect to TSL and what you see sitting where you're sitting, being an extremely powerful company in the Caribbean. How have you seen cybersecurity evolve from a board of directors standpoint 5 years ago and last year, right down to even in the last 9 months? Can you give us a little bit of a journey of that?
Oh, sure. There's been tremendous change in this space. And I think the change has really come from, let's break it down to 3 different areas, right? So the first one you just mentioned with your question, right, which was COVID. COVID has certainly lit a fire to the need for IT sectors to start being careful on what they're doing and how they're doing it. We've had this mad rush of remote access, remote users, and you are opening up your business every time you open that window, and you need to be able to protect from it. The second major factor is technology itself. Technology has changed. Long ago, there were no ability to remote in. There was just a flat network. You were in the organization, and if you were not in the organization, you couldn't connect. That has drastically changed. And with all the tools, the invention of smartphone, tablets, bring your own device, all of this has started morphing the risk and increasing the risk factor and putting everybody in a position where they have to consider same. And then the third and one of the most important, in my opinion, right now that we're facing is millennials. Millennials are not just coming up, they're starting to entrench themselves into the workforce, and as consumers, they have a very high expectation of efficiency when conducting transactions with a business. And from a board perspective, that's something you need to keep your eyes on, keep tabs on, and make sure that you are making those necessary changes. For example, I was speaking to a team member yesterday, and I mentioned to her my thought process on it. And her response was basically, you're talking about going to a restaurant or going and having an experience where IT wasn't there. And her response was, I wouldn't even take that step. I would measure that organization before even visiting them. I will look for their website. I will look for their social media. I will look for things about them and how easy it is to conduct that transaction with them. And if that's not there, they're not interested, they're moving on. So from a board perspective, for me, that's one of the key elements to look at. Getting yourself ready for the future customer, which is the millennials, and the way they're expecting to conduct business with you. And understanding that once you start opening up that digitization and you're making that digital transformation, you're creating risk. And cybersecurity has to go hand in hand with it.
Interesting. Jake, I know you have an interesting view within cybersecurity, being at the Barbados level. From a Barbados as an ecosystem from cybersecurity, what are some of the trends you're seeing with respect to the board of directors or within the ecosystem for cybersecurity?
So, truthfully, Stuart hit on a couple of things there. I think the Corbin as a whole is, we're not far off. Trends are just what Stuart mentioned. We've got millennials in the marketplace or in the workforce, not just in entry-level positions, but moving up to middle management and senior management. So catering to the consumer-based workforce, so to speak, if I use that term. Also, embracing work from home is something that is, we've got regional and international firms here that's kind of that is commonplace. A lot of the smaller and local entities that operate just in Barbados or just in some of the other smaller islands around us have been forced to quickly adapt. So I think those are really critical things that we're seeing here based out of Barbados.
Interesting. And with regards to companies investing in security technologies, Jake, is that something you're seeing more of? And again, I want to take the lens of last year versus COVID, because I know COVID may skew that. Is that correct as well? Yeah. Does COVID skew what companies are investing in security? That's my first question. And second question is, have you seen a growth over the last couple of years in companies investing in security technologies?
Yeah, 100%. If you speak to anybody who is a CISO, a CIO, or IT manager, depending on the size of the business, it's, okay, what's the investment in security? All right, well, we pay for the firewall. We've got antivirus. We do all the other routine practices and policies. What else do we need? Up until COVID, that's been a dramatic stance in the boardroom, I guess. Where I think we've been slow and where COVID has really pushed us forward is just understanding and adapting to that risk exposure as we digitize society, as we digitize our businesses, our day-to-day lives, really and truly. In many cases, we're nearly completely dependent on technology to function day to day. Whether it's the financial sector, whether it's you're a retailer, whether in construction, manufacturing, healthcare, we need to. COVID has really amplified the fact that we really need to digest the risk of being compromised and budget against it. Kind of given COVID, at least in my sub-region, if you want to call it that, it's really amplified the risk of being compromised. Because we're not really securing for the threats of today. We're securing for the threats of tomorrow. We need to understand this at the board level, and given the way the threats are globally, we need to understand that we're preparing for the unknown. The rate at which cyber threats are advancing, the rate at which we are en masse investing and reinvesting in technology to secure our businesses is not on par in our region pre-COVID. We can no longer do things the way we did last year, and I think in many boardrooms we're stepping forward and understanding that. There's been not just COVID, but there's been some other factors in the region that have kind of nudged that forward. And we do need to understand that if we're going to secure for tomorrow, given we do need to quickly shift to adapt to and leverage the new technologies that are around to secure our workspace. Whether it is, given we've got employees are all greatly dispersed. Our applications are on-prem or on cloud. They're in the office. The threats that we face today are highly sophisticated. We need to understand them a lot better and leverage the tools in the market to better secure and combat against these threats.
I just want to expand on the threats that you're talking about. As we went across different continents over the last week,
right,
we've discovered various types of threats. Can you just expand on the types of threats the Caribbean islands are seeing, and what kind of threats are those? Okay. So
sure. A hot topic, but also a quiet topic is ransomware in our space. Some of it's been quite public over the last 2 to 3 months. A lot of it is not spoken of. Most of that, from what I've seen, is through phishing attacks mainly, and we just seem to be a hotbed of activity, of threats coming out of Asia, of Europe, of Eastern Europe. It's been things have been pretty busy. That's the truth.
Good. And a lot of our viewers don't know this, but I was just pulling this information up. The population of the Caribbean islands combined together, which makes up about 20 countries across and plus 20 plus, is about 44 million, actually 45 million. The population of Canada is about 37 million. Just to give a view of the dynamic and the size of the Caribbeans. Now, Stuart, I'm going to start off with you on this question, and that's with regards to why should people not underestimate cybersecurity across all these Caribbean islands?
Good question. What I would say is it ties back to what we were talking about earlier. Because of the change that we've seen with the change in technology, the millennials coming into the workforce, and then COVID, we found ourselves in a situation where a firewall is simply no longer enough. We've lived and we've breathed that once you have a firewall, you're okay. Those days are clearly over, right? We need to get that security to get all the way up through the levels of generations, all the way up to Gen 5. We need to look at endpoint management. We need to start being concerned with how are they getting in? What are they doing? How are they reaching? And being able to cover all of those bases from a security perspective. It's critical for the success of the business. I'll give you a little example. The global risk report that comes out every year, from 2018 come forward, cybersecurity has been up in the top 10. In some reports, it's actually in the top 5, rivaling things like natural disaster. We at board levels are all preparing ourselves, and we all have to have a plan in place for natural disasters, right? It's time that cybersecurity is treated the same way. We need to start having plans in place for what are we going to do, not if, but when something happens. That's how I would tackle it.
Well, I mean, that's one of the most powerful statements everyone uses across the world. It's not about if, it's about when. Patricia, I want to ask you a couple of questions with regards to how does Trinidad and Tobago compare to some of the other Caribbean islands when it comes to cybersecurity, or the understanding of how important cybersecurity is at the board level?
I think it's becoming more of an issue to be discussed at the board level. I sit on the Guardian Holdings board, and now we find that we are now getting reports in terms of what's happening in terms of phishing attacks, the whole slew of things that could happen. That was not something that you would have seen on a board agenda 10 years ago. And you're finding more board of directors realize the responsibility they have and the due diligence that's required to ask those questions. Before, you would have thought, well, that belongs just to the IT guy, and I'm on a board, I may not know too much. But I think, as Stuart said, I mean, what we're seeing is that the black swan events are happening, and the risk of a big cyber attack happening in Trinidad is very real. Quite recently, we had a cyber attack of one of the insurance companies in Trinidad. So I think it's becoming, directors themselves are now becoming more comfortable having this on the agenda, comfortable about asking the questions because of the reputational risk that can happen to companies if these issues are not dealt with. And also, as a director, you're there for oversight. And if you are not asking these questions, then you also can lose your position on a board if you are not doing that due diligence.
And organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit, and their boards, are dealing with risk in various, especially with COVID, within various parts of departments within their organization. Cybersecurity being one of the many other risks. One of the problems that I see being on this side of the table in a neutral, unbiased sort of position is that you have the head of IT trying to speak to the board, and the board not really understanding what they're really talking about, because at times it could be too technical, or the budgets do not make sense. What are some of the advices you would give, being as a CFO, responsible a lot of times for the budgets, to the heads of IT when they're approaching the boards with regards to changes that are required?
Well, I think if you were only to wear your CFO hat, you would only say what's the return on investment in terms of the spend that is required. But I think it requires a different kind of, we now need to have a different kind of conversation with our IT departments. In that, for example, we also need to see them not only as security leaders, but business leaders, to be part of the conversation at the board. Also, when we're looking at, I think quite often, not all, I would say, SMEs are quite sophisticated in terms of what it is they need. So if an IT specialist were to come in, it's like, okay, let's just replace the computers, we need to upgrade. But I think what we now need to say is what's required for us to do more. So we should be asking questions around, for example, data integrity and confidentiality. We should be asking our IT experts to bring, are there programs to train our employees so they understand the risks? We should also be looking at how resilient the system could be if there was a cyber attack. We should also be recognizing that the budget we may set now has to be very future oriented, because a lot of things can happen in between. And as we know, replacing software we have to really make that commitment, because it's not something that we can just say it could never happen to us. We're seeing it happen. We've seen what has happened at Equifax, and I don't think the Caribbean countries are going to be any less likely of having an attack like that if we don't build resilience.
Yeah, and just another question, and that is, let's say I'm a CFO within an organization within the Caribbean islands, or any other or any other continent. What kind of advice would you give to that CFO when looking at security budgets, and what should they be considering before approving a budget? What kind of advice would you give them, Patricia?
I think one of the things as I said earlier, is that we now have to recognize that this is high priority. I think COVID has brought about a different mindset for many of us leading our companies, and they need to have business continuity planning is essential. And a lot of companies now need to invest in that. And cyber and your IT system is also a key part of that going on. So we really can't have a blind eye to that, because as we know, if something happens, we can technically lose our data, and what would happen, supply chains can be disrupted. We also have to recognize if not with some of our employees working from home, our data is now left in a space that we would have never imagined. Imagine your employee being able to access your computer system from home. 20 years ago, you would never dream of allowing them access. Now you're blindly giving them access to it. It's like, what can happen? They're technically downloading documents that they may print off at their home. Are they shredding it? Who at home is seeing this stuff? So there are a lot of things going on that we now have to start thinking about very, very differently, and really keep planning and playing off a lot of what if scenarios in our minds. But understand that this is now a fixed cost of our business.
Interesting. Jake, I want to change the conversation a little bit and go into sales, really. I know I'm just taking a look here, we have quite a bit of people on, and I know a lot of times I get approached all the time on LinkedIn or through Cyber Exchange online, and those are questions on how do we deal with sales in terms of rebuttals and objections. Taking a look at the Caribbean and the types of feedbacks you get, or some of the challenges you get when trying to sell solutions to organizations, what are some of the common objections you get within organizations when it comes to cyber at the board level, at the board level?
Okay. So, maybe let me change it a bit there. So, I think the common problem we have, particularly in my region, is really education. The need for security and business decisions, and given the complexity of today's threats, many times when you show the execs tech in one way, it doesn't necessarily resonate with the board until we show maybe the risk for the business if they don't invest in it, type of thing. We shouldn't necessarily expect executives to understand the threats in grave detail. That's an issue for the likes of us as integrators, as vendors, as the IT manager or the CISO to share with the board. I find we usually get feedback when it resonates to show risk to their output, the output within the business. So the value in investment in the cyber security solutions, another assumption we get is, Jay, why on earth do we need that? Why do we need to pay you for a service? My staff can do that. I've got 5 guys, 2 guys, guys is a general term, people on our team. They can do that. But in reality, to keep up with today's threats, using yesterday's methodology or decision process, we'd have to hire, we'd have to double the team basically, to sift through all of the different things going on across our platforms and to keep track of what's happening. And even then, if we had our staff doing the way we did it before, it might be days, weeks, or months too late, and you may well be under attack and don't have a clue. We need to embrace and showcase this in a different fashion. So I think education is is critical there. You know, I've had instances where, you know, a customer has invested in a cybersecurity solution, and they come back to us and say, well, Jake, look, the contract's expired. You know, we're retiring the product, what have you, because, you know, we've never been compromised. So why on earth do I need to spend on this? You know, Jake, we've averted the attack. You know, or we've been attacked and you guys have protected us. It isn't going to happen again. You know, as I think we've mentioned already on this, and I'm sure you've talked about it over the last 8 or 9 days. You know, it's not like being struck by lightning. You know, the probability of it happening is, you know, it's not one in however many, but a matter of if and when that threat will reappear. You know, it may not be tomorrow, but it may be the day after. So for me, education and the way we disseminate the information up to the board is really critical.
Stuart, you have an interesting role being the CEO of an organization that's been around for quite some time in the Caribbean's a powerhouse when it comes to technology, really focusing in on the cybersecurity side. When you're speaking to other CEOs across the Caribbean, what are those conversations like when it comes to what Jake has really talked about, and that is, hey, why do we need it? We haven't been breached. None of our organizations have been breached. We're totally fine. Why do we need to spend all this money? What are those sort of conversations like with other CEOs, and how are you overcoming those conversations?
So they do exist. They definitely exist. We do still have them. But I think as time is going by and as all the things are changing, the way of doing business is changing, and the amount of different areas of threat is exponentially growing, I think people are starting to buy into the concept that something needs to be done. The approach that I am trying to push when I'm talking to other CEOs and trying to go through it with them is one of two major things. One is plan, and two is culture change. Majority of the incidents that take place that are successful were only successful due to lack of knowledge or some unsuspecting victim doing something they should not have done. It is an extremely difficult position for a CISO to try and educate a team or a staff complement on how to be careful, what to do, why not to do it, that culture change side. So for me, my conversation with CEOs right now is plan for an attack, pretend that it is going to happen. Plan for what are you going to do when it happens, who are you going to call, what is your expectations of them, what have you put in place to ensure you could still operate and function as a business. And most importantly, on top of all that planning, if you don't instill that culture change, it's not going to work. So much so, to be very frank, TSL is right now embarking on an exercise. We've actually created a email called staysecured@tslgroup.com, and we're actually using that as a platform to get the message out there. We're not charging, it's free content, and our mission is literally to try and create that culture change or help organizations create that culture change. People can write and ask questions. We have short sessions, boosts. And yeah, it's just to build that education. And once the board members start feeling it and hearing it and seeing it and understanding that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and what are we going to do when it happens, it will change. So we're not there yet, but we're a lot closer than we were 2-3 years ago.
And culture change comes from the top down. And you can see within our conversation right now, you guys have already, I guess the best way to put it, drank the Kool-Aid in terms of you're convinced, you know that cybersecurity is a problem at the board level. Stuart, how are you dealing with culture change when it comes to education? And I'm talking about those millennials that are completing university or colleges or taking certification programs. How has there been a shift in the millennials when it comes to cyber and educating themselves on cyber and actually taking formalized education? How's that happening in the Caribbean?
I would say slow but steady. What I would tell you is a very big thing we're seeing is that the older generations are very skeptical to share their data. They don't want to use their card online. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. They're very cagey with their data. Their data is their data. The millennials are very free. and very open to sharing their data, shouting loud and putting it out there. They're very happy to shop online, very happy down to order food and use like food drop or things like this that would bring food to you. They're very comfortable with it. So their comfort level revolving around technology and the use of technology is certainly a lot higher than the older generations. Are they fully aware of the risks? Maybe not. What are we doing, to answer your question more directly? What are we doing to educate? Exactly what I just shared. We are actually creating a program right now to get that messaging out there into corporate Trinidad. Because the reality is the millennials are entrenched in the workforce now. Jake said it, they're getting up to mid-management. Some of them have even reached senior management levels already. So they're in a place now where we need to get that message across. We need to educate and we need to make sure they understand those risks that come along with this freedom of using your data online.
And Jake, question for you in the Barbados is, and you could take a wide lens on the Caribbean as well, but just really specifically focusing in on Barbados, we see the reports there, 3.5 million unfulfilled jobs, cybersecurity, there's not enough people within the ecosystem, which are the young people that are going through university, college, or certification training. What is being done in Barbados with respect to education in terms of within colleges and university, or even private certification trainings that you can take from a technical standpoint?
Sure. So, in the English Caribbean, we've got the University of the West Indies. We've got 3 main campuses, as well as an open campus, which is an online education, the online bit of the school. In Barbados, I guess in all 3 main campuses, they're offering, cyber programs. There's some local polytechnic schools, technical colleges that are creating programs. Naturally, you can go online and do industry-based training and whatnot. We see a substantial uptake in vendor-based training, where they may be using product A today, but it's kind of just there, as opposed to we've invested in product, but also invested in the cyber awareness to support those platforms, to better advance them and keep evolving them. So I think we are on the uptake in terms of as a society, and as obviously the educational institutions creating programs for advancements in
right. And Patricia, being the president at the American Chamber of Commerce in Trinidad and Tobago, dealing with organizations, are you hearing from them there's not enough talent?
Oh, definitely so. I mean, Stuart, you would know this very well. Of course, there's talent, but I think we have to find ways to get the talent in to the organizations. And quite often, I think, speaking from the SMEs, it's still very scary to bring in that kind of talent, because you're thinking, here I am entrusting all my data to somebody who's totally new. And I am part of the older generation, so I struggle very much with some of these issues. But I think the key thing for us in terms of some of our businesses who are still very much nervous about hiring an IT person, there's talent out there. We just have to find the right fit, and there has to be a great level of trust, especially for people who don't have very robust systems. It's a real leap of faith that businesses take. So it's important to get the correct match in terms of who it is you bring into your organization. But I think exactly like what Jake said, I mean, we in Trinidad, we have to look at how it is our government can develop the human capacity in our country to have more students go into those fields, so that we can have a talent pipeline going forward.
Yeah, and that's the biggest challenge all across the world. And we were speaking to, we were on with Africa on Monday, and also the Middle East, but Africa specifically. One of the things we came across, speaking to organizations, and discovered is there's a lot of Africans that are moving to Canada or North America, finding better jobs, higher paying jobs. And one of the other things we noticed with Asia as well is the same thing. Folks from India or Pakistan coming to Canada or North America, increasing their salary, 4 times, and being in a different position. Are you seeing that as well? And I'm going to open this up really to anyone that would like to answer this. From a Caribbean standpoint, what are the challenges? Are you seeing this as a challenge?
So I can answer that one. Yes, for sure. We refer to it, I'm sure you do as well, as brain drain. One of the largest things that are exported by America and Canada to the Caribbean region is education. Majority of the folks that have education or certificates or diplomas or masters, it's from another country. The Caribbean has done a fantastic job, I will say that, so that gets heard, over the last decade in improving our education system from a tertiary level. And we are getting better. And there are people coming from abroad and other countries to our education system as well. But it's not on the level of how many export, how many are being educated in Canada and in America. Once the education takes place there, that thought process of maybe it's a better life, first world country living, there are benefits that come with staying, the job pays more, etc., etc., etc. So there is that element of we are losing some of our talent to foreign entities that are taking them on. It certainly is very real. I wouldn't say it's a struggle anymore, but it certainly still exists. It's there and it's happening on a day-to-day basis.
I think.
Jump in, guys. Whoever wants to. Patricia,
go ahead, Patricia. Ladies first. Go ahead.
I have to agree with Stuart. I think it's because a lot of the reason we can't seem to attract that talent to SMEs is because we have not been able to create that as a key position. So it's always been a by the way position. And you're right, the salary levels aren't matching what's being paid out there. So we really do have to do a lot of work at the company level to say this is a key role, just like your HR, your accountant role. These are now key roles that companies need to cater for. And there's no way any business can survive in the years going forward without having an IT person on staff. So we have to now make these attractive careers to the young generation, which was something we never did before. It was just a select few who did it, and because we were operating in the mindset this will never happen, and that only happens to the large multinational firms, that will never happen to a small business. This is why I think we can't seem to get an adequate pipeline. So even the SMEs have to start creating those positions and making them attractive. Yeah, trying to keep the talent.
I agree with you, Patricia. You hit the nail on the head there. So I don't need to regurgitate that, but what I will add is that I've seen since COVID, with obviously the embracing of work from home, I'm seeing a lot more local talent here. Consider jobs in the US, in Canada, in the UK, simply because COVID has really opened the doors for work from home. I can earn a US salary, so to speak, and or Canadian salary, and sit in my home here in Barbados. It's the dynamics are right there and then. So that's something hit on.
Yeah, the world has changed, and
yep.
It's interesting because one of the things we see in Canada, for example, and I'll use a case study here, is for example, there's a lot of cybersecurity professionals or technology professionals that are coming over from India. 2 things happen when they get to Canada. Number 1, they stay, or number 2, they go back. But when you ask them, why are you heading back? Because they say, well, home is where the heart is. The Caribbean, having beautiful weather, is definitely a carrot on the stick for people that do come to Canada to gain the experience, to make a little bit of extra money, but the home is where the heart is. You're always thinking, hey, I want to go back home. But there has to be a reason to go back home when it comes to cybersecurity, and that is really the culture change. One of the things that we have to look at from a culture change is the government. And with Canada, for example, as I mentioned, our population is about 37 million. However, you really have a federal initiative, and then you have a provincial initiative right below that. So there's no different sections. When it comes to the Caribbean, you have these various governance, and you have these various government bodies that really have their own objectives, especially with tourism now being something that has hit extremely hard. across the Caribbean islands. Are you seeing a shift or a different focus when it comes to cybersecurity at the government level? And what is it that TSL is doing, or even the American Chamber of Commerce doing, with regards to unifying the clans, I guess, or unifying the government initiatives with regards to taking cybersecurity serious? I'm going to take this right off the bat with Patricia. What are you seeing?
I think there's a lot of talk around it. Not a lot of action, but I think they recognize there's a lot of action. As the American Chamber, we continue to try to have dialogue with the government. We have one of our board members sit on the ICT roundtable. Whenever we have simple things, you know, when we had our cybersecurity sessions, we give the government a few seats, you know, try to make them partners with us, because quite often they say they don't have the budgets, but we try to work with them in very small ways like that. We try to, I mean, one of the reasons we did our tech conference and had one day on cybersecurity was to be able to bring the thought leaders to Trinidad so that we could have exposed our members and the wider community to having access to that kind of knowledge. And some of the programs, people were able to get PD, professional development units. So we're trying very much to make, I mean, some steps in that direction. It's not big steps, but we think it's a great way for us to start the conversation going. And then of course we partnered with TSL last year. And when we did our tech conference, we were totally blown away by that, their room being totally full for the entire day. That was like the most popular session. So we try to fill the need that way.
And Stuart, what are you doing with regards to like speaking to the government, within Trinidad and Tobago?
So here's what I would say. Trinidad and Tobago is very much dependent on oil and gas and the oil and gas sector. All right, with COVID and with the situation currently with oil and gas prices, we have no choice but to find other ways of either cutting expenditure or improving revenue, right? It's simple. So the government has embraced that. The government also has seen the need for digital transformation. So throughout the budget, they are taking steps in many different sectors within the government entity to start offering that service. So for example, things as simple as requesting a new birth certificate. You can now do it online, pay online, and it gets delivered to you. I know that may sound to you as being in Canada as normal and something from long ago. Well, no, that's not normal for us here in the Caribbean. It's pretty new and it's great. And they are starting to take those initiatives. And as they put those initiatives in place, as we mentioned at the top of the program, once you start digital transformation, you start putting those things in place, you're opening up yourself to security risk. End of text. So it goes hand in hand. They know that, and they've started to see that, and they've actually placed a minister for the first time. So we have a minister of digital transformation. That awareness building with him on his cyber, going hand in hand with it, has begun. We're going through that process. He is an IT man for many decades, and he knows his stuff. So I do think the importance is slowly but surely getting there, and we are making these steps towards being more secure and more digitally friendly for the millennial consumer.
And Jake, Barbados being one of the most interesting and beautiful islands. I mean, all the Caribbean is beautiful. However, with respect to Barbados, from a government standpoint, what are you seeing within Barbados from a cybersecurity top-down approach?
Sure. So if I step back, let's say 2.5 years, we had a new government step in. And Barbados, I would have to say, was maybe in the dark ages, so to speak, in terms of technology adoption. We never, like Trinidad, we never had a minister on the floor of Parliament. One of the first things that the Prime Minister did was appoint a minister, actually brought her home from Canada. She was working in the private sector in Canada to drive our digital transformation journey. Very much like what Stuart said, some of the stuff that you may be, maybe common practice to you and foreign to us, standing in lines in government offices for, the entire day was normal. And now, we've put technology and cyber on the forefront. So yes, streamlining government operations. We never had a central IT department, so to speak, in government, as strange as that may sound. We now have a central department. We've got a cybersecurity unit that's been formed, directors, very senior levels of public sector roles to manage cyber within government. So tremendous advances over the last 2.5 years, and you know, a tremendous journey that we're on here in Barbados for the next 2.5, 5 years. Very aggressive.
And culture change, that has been the theme when it comes to your board of directors, and then some of the things we've talked about is education. One of the things that I wanted to focus in on for the next couple of minutes, and we only have about 14 minutes left, and that's really coming down to the financial aspect, right? And the implications of an attack on an organization. Data being the new oil is so valuable within organizations. Sometimes organizations don't really understand what is valuable within the organization when it comes to data. When you are speaking to organizations, Patricia, at the American Chamber of Commerce, how are you discussing the implications, the financial implications of a cyber attack on that organization? How do you transition into that conversation, and what are some of the things you talk about with them?
Well, I think we are very much aware that by 2021, cyber risks are going to run us at a global cost of about $6 trillion. So this is going to be really key going forward. And I think in having the conversations around not only do we talk about the legal and the reputational risks if there's loss of data, but as you said, the financial risk is huge, because quite often the financial cost is the loss of a company's data. And this can really disrupt a lot of companies in terms of the online transactions that they're doing. Also, for example, a lot of your confidential data is lost. You can lose all your bank data, your customer information. And if this gets into the wrong hands, you can definitely lose your competitive advantage or totally fold as a business. So those things are very, very key. And for many of us in operating in this space, to imagine that going out the window is inconceivable. And if you lose, or if you had to play out all the scenarios in your business, if you lose this, what would happen? How would you now regain the trust of your customers and all your externals, both your internal and external stakeholders? But more importantly, how do you start to rebuild your business when all that has been lost? How do you then go to the bank and say, how do I get capital to restart my business? The first thing they're going to say, okay, why did your business fold? You didn't put in enough checks and balances. How do you go now and to an insurance company and say, I need to have insurance for these sorts of things? So there are a lot of long-term consequences to a business if this is not handled properly.
Wow. That's it's powerful, because that's the reality of it, what you just said. And once you are breached, how do you reset again? And especially with the fact of not having that education or that culture within the Caribbean, it makes it a little bit harder and challenging. We just received a question here, and Jake, it's sort of just to wrap up what we were discussing with regards to employment opportunities. Do you think the push from the Barbados government for remote work visas or non-nationals will create a cybersecurity issue? That's to Jake.
I don't think so, to be honest with you. We have, Barbados has embarked, whether you may not know, a work from Barbados campaign, 12-month visa. Come and work if you earn over more than 50K a year. You can, for a nominal fee, you can come and stay on the island for 12 months. I don't see that as this as a big threat. We're sound on infrastructure. Funny enough, over the weekend, I happened to see an expat, somebody who works abroad, lives abroad here in Barbados for 12 months, literally sitting on the beach with their laptop working, connected to their corporate network, etc. So I don't see that as a major threat at this junction.
Just created a commercial here. I think a lot of people
honestly, if the government probably couldn't script a better commercial. Literally, a lady sitting in a hammock at the beach, connected to Wi-Fi because a number of the beaches have Wi-Fi access. Sitting working comfortably. I don't think she was consuming any alcoholic beverages, but something quite refreshing, and being productive.
Wow. Thank you for that, Jake. I'm going to take this back to Stuart, and I'm hoping that I can get a real-life example. Obviously, you don't have to discuss the details of the organization, but can you tell me a time in the most recent past with respect to a company being breached and then coming to you after the fact, and how you dealt with that, and what were the repercussions of that for that organization?
All right, yeah, you're definitely putting me between a rock and a hard place for that one. So the answer is yes, it does indeed happen. Up to today, what we've seen is every single time they come, it's when it's too late. It's after the incident has happened. So we find ourselves very much still in a reactive state. What do? The second a client reaches out to us and says, look, we've been breached, we need assistance, we would lean on partners that we have within the channel. We look after the partners that are in an IRT state, right? When you're out there and you're looking at what to buy and why to buy it and how to buy it, it's one of the key elements that should be considered. So this is for any CISO, any board member, anybody listening or viewing us right now. It is critical that whatever organization you invest in, when something does happen and you call for help, they have an incident response team. If they don't have an incident response team, you're in some significant trouble, right? And again, it comes down to your plan, right? Your security plan. So what we do, because when they reach out to us, we draw on partnerships, right? And we utilize that partnership for their IRT team. We get the IRT team involved and we get them assisting the customer as soon as possible. One of the major things we've also seen, which you didn't ask, but I want to share, is sometimes people may feel that, hey, we'll just wipe and rebuild. Wipe and rebuild does not necessarily solve the problem. Unless you find the root cause of the issue, where it is, and you get rid of it, it can reoccur. There are many instances where these attacks are not going to trigger immediately. They are timed, or they're set on a timer and they explode months down the road. And if you don't root the issue, it will remain. So yeah, we have received calls like that. We have seen two spells actually. One was about 2.5 years ago, and one was this year, where we saw this upsurge, 3-4 clients, and those are the ones, as Jake said, we're aware of. Remember, this is the unspoken territory we're in right now, right? You don't call names, you don't go into details. It's difficult, and a lot of times it does end up in the press, but for a lot of the times it does not end up in the press. It's kept very quiet, it's suppressed information, and people do what they can to get out of it. Simple.
So Stuart, if I could just kind of maybe throw a different thing there on it, or related rather. As you said, and as Patricia said, security is really just an afterthought. I guess historically at the board level. Frankly speaking, large, small, doesn't matter. If we do not have, whether you define them as a CISO or not, somebody that owns the role of the CISO at the table, we are, you need to rethink what you're doing. You need to have somebody who owns that role and responsibility at their core at the table when it comes to security. Otherwise, you're going to remain just an afterthought, and we're going to be in a, fall into a loop or a cycle of being reactive rather than being proactive from the top down.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the topic, is who owns the cybersecurity risk at the board level or at the management level. And one of the things we've discovered is whoever that person is, there has to be a culture change within an organization, right down from the receptionist all the way up to the top, to the CEO. And we have 5 minutes left, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to simply talk to us a little bit about, and we'll just do a roundtable on how people can reach out to you and what are some of the initiatives you have coming down the pipeline. That would be great. So I'll start off with Patricia.
I could be reached easily at my company's email address, patricia@esaoilfield.com. In terms of the initiatives we have coming down at AmCham related to cyber, I mean, we're still trying to look at how it is we can pivot our tech conference next year. We're going to continue our partnership with the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, who are very well known in the area of cyber risk. We will be continuing to offer courses and have different opportunities to engage with the government and offer these programs to our members. A key thing for us that's going to kickstart our program next year is a business continuity planning workshop. And part of that is going to include the need for an IT recovery strategy for companies, which we will be offering to our members free in the first quarter.
Very cool. One of the things that CyberX has been doing for some time is tabletop exercises, something called Breach the Keep. We were running these pre-COVID physically, where we would come and set up at an organization, have some fun, play some Dungeons and Dragons based on cybersecurity. Over the last 7-8 months, we've pivoted and built out an online version, which allows organizations, both technical and non-technical, to play a game online. It allows that team building, it allows a lot of fun, but most importantly, it teaches security awareness through an actual breach that occurs. One of the things that we find with organizations is that are not really, the culture is not there, is once they play these games at their executive level, and it's based around cybersecurity being the theme, they have that aha moment where they go, wait a minute, we are not prepared. If a breach actually occurred, A, we don't know how to communicate properly, and B, we're wiped and we're done. So one of the things we would love to do with the Caribbean in the next year is see how we can bring some of these really cool things we've done. And so I'm looking forward to that, Patricia, in 2021. Jake, the table's yours. If there's anything that you would like to say.
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, I can be reached at jake.corbin@tslgroup.com. As Stuart mentioned, TSL is embarking on a campaign. We've recently started it here in November, running through December into January and likely beyond. We can be reached at staysecure@tslgroup.com. If you have a small query, if you've got an incident, if you are, whatever you're looking for in the space, we're here to help you in that sense. We're trying not to do weekly webinars to saturate everybody's calendar. But ultimately it's an end-to-end campaign that we're working on to try to help raise the awareness on cybersecurity.
And right before we get to Stuart to give the final closing here, I had a question come in with regards to women involved in cybersecurity. Last year, Patricia, we held, or this year actually, in March, we held our Canadian Women in Cybersecurity. We do have it planned again for 2021 in March, but we're also adding our Intercontinental Women in Cybersecurity. So really women around the world. And just wanted to ask, there's a question that came in, how do you think the Caribbean can get more women involved in cyber positions? So if you can just take, I know this is a huge can that we need to really open up, but just if you can just sum it up, please.
I think we definitely need to start changing our education system from early on, and I know the government is working towards that. I mean, definitely girls who can coding very early, just starting to open up the tech careers for not only young girls, but the entire student population. So we can start making that as a small step. And also, as we said, we also have to do our homework in the Caribbean and the SMEs to start creating positions to attract the local talent back here. And I mean, one of the things we really try to do at AmCham, we have a women's leadership conference, and we try to bring in world-renowned speakers in their field to inspire our local population to get into this field. And that conference is going to be in March next year.
Thank you. And we'll love to coordinate on that. And just to finalize, last but not least, I mean, the topic was, is cybersecurity high on the board of directors? on the list of board of directors. We know that Stuart, it's extremely high on his list. Stuart, we've heard about some of the really cool initiatives you have coming down on the pipeline. Just some closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much. I would say stay secure at the tslgroup.com. That's the connection. I put it in the chat, so everyone should be able to see it and copy it from there. And the mission of our campaign is three things, and it's what we touched on throughout today's session. The first is culture, and the plan is to try and change culture via education, via knowledge. So we want to do small sessions, as Jake mentioned, and also we're looking at the possibility, just like you, of gamifying education, finding a way to partner with organizations that can help us gamify that education, make it a little bit easier, more user-friendly. We're looking at self-paced education. And then outside of the education and culture change, plan. Put your plan in place. What are you going to do when it happens? What's going to take place? And then partner with incident response teams. People that are going to be able, they're professionals, this is their job, this is what they do. They spring into action and they assist you through the process. That's how we plan to attack it.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia, Stuart, Jake, for your time, your insight. It was greatly appreciated. Plan. Those are the key words for today when it comes to the board of directors and priorities when it comes to cybersecurity. I would also like for you to plan for the rest of the day, as we have some really cool sessions coming up. We have insider threat detection powered by TSL Group. We also have keeping up with changing the threat landscape. In addition to that, we have some really cool sessions later on in the afternoon with leveraging security out of big data, and that's actually in Spanish. We had a session on Monday in French. So we're trying to plan on being very intercontinental and different languages. On behalf of the CyberX team, we'd like to thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for our next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Good day.